Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Big John here. We've got some guests on tonight. We've got Lee Bishop guesting, who's wise on housing. But first of all, just wanted to play this video. Maxine, great patriot out in Northern Ireland, and Pat. When Pat heard about Maxine's troubles with the daughter getting housing, he wanted to do a little video, and I'm going to show it because it's had a good run of views on Twitter, YouTube, 12,000 on my YouTube alone, which is exceptional. So we'll just play this.
Guinness National Housing Party, United Kingdom. I'm in Belfast at the 12th of July celebrations, and we've just bumped into some of the London contingent, and we're with Maxine here today, enjoying herself. Yes. And you know, we got talking about our party with the National Housing Party, and Maxine just told us a very sad story about her daughter. Her daughter lives in Tottenham with a 7-month-old baby, and she's in a studio flat, and she's overcrowded. She's applied to the council. Is it Haringey Council?
Haringey, yes.
Yeah, and they won't even put her on the waiting list.
No.
And how do you feel about that, Maxine?
I feel disgusted.
Yeah.
My daughter, right, has worked all her life, right, since she was at school. Right?
Yeah.
Worked all her life, paid her taxes, national insurance. When she needs help, she can't get it.
Yeah.
She applied to Haringey to go on the housing list, and they said no, because she's not homeless, but she's got a 7-month-old baby. Yeah. Right, and now he's starting to turn over and trying to crawl. He's got nowhere to crawl.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And that's it. We've been looking in Clacton for her to get somewhere down there. Can't get nothing down there.
Yeah, yeah. There's an estimated 1 million UK citizens waiting for council flats. And I bet if you went onto the Haringey website, the council website, there'll be a section on there saying how proud they are that they welcome in refugees from all around the world. The game is over, the party's over, we're full up, we need to stop all this, attracting all the world's refugees into our country and put our own people first. Because it's an absolute disgrace that born and bred Londoners, whose generations go back hundreds of years, are not even allowed to go on the housing waiting list, when regularly, every month, refugees are given housing. This is what's going on. It's happening in Camden, where I live. There's thousands of working class people. They're not allowed to go on the waiting list. Yet, they're saying refugees are welcome here all the time. It's an absolute disgrace. It's a crisis, and this is one of our main campaigning points. And thanks for letting us know your story, Maxine.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
And we wish your daughter all the best to hopefully get something sorted out.
Only hope.
Yeah.
There's no hope at the moment.
Well, the only thing we can do is pray to Jesus and vote in elections. Join a party who you think's going to help the situation. And thanks for giving you our time.
No, that's fine.
So yeah, we met Maxine in Northern Ireland, and that was Maxine's story. But it's not a unfamiliar story. It certainly isn't. Everyone on this panel could say the same. They've heard that story. Good evening, Nick, Tommy Trump, Budgie Burgers, Serena and Mark Williams. Thank you, guys. But yeah, and lately, since Labour took over, and the Conservative brought in a rule of if you've been here like more than 10 years, you're first on the list. Now they've scrapped that. So now, unfortunately, it's going to be refugees, asylum seekers, all that kind of people coming in. And you know, what's my own views on housing? Well, I live in Oldham. And Oldham's a mill town. And what it is in Oldham, a lot of the houses are not up to spec. They're not up to spec. Some of our housing's 150 years old. And this will be across the country. And there is plenty of housing, but it's what kind of housing there is. Everyone always says this. And, you know, we need housing for families. There is none. And like in Oldham, we have a lot, like I said, we have a lot of mill townhouses, and there's a particular street called Fox Street, and the houses, unless they're absolutely redone, they're no good for old people, they're no good for families, they're only good for certain kinds of people. And this is across the board. We've got old people who have to go up and down 2 or 3 flights of steps to get out of their house, and they've not got level access and stuff like that. Now that's just issues within that, but tonight we're going to delve in a bit more with our candidate, member, and guest Lee about house building and what they're doing. And Lee sent me a link to a magazine, Construction News. And I mean, I've got the link here, and at the top it says Labour's blueprint for the Green Belt. Labour's blueprint for the Green Belt. And as we know, for the past few years across the UK, people have been complaining and are worried about development on Green Belt land and stuff like that. Now, you know, I'm worried about it, but it's gone past that with me. If we have to build houses and we have to build them on Greenland, we're going to do. And if we have to build it on where Richie Sunak lives, in his green area, that's where we're going to build them. If we have to build them in the posh areas of the towns and stuff, that's where we're going to build them. They're building new houses in Upper Mill, which is a like posh area of Oldham. And it's just going to... They're going to build these 300 houses, and it's just going to end up like a ghetto. I promise you. But anyway, let's get on with the rest of the show. So, good evening, Lee.
Right.
How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you.
So tell us about where your experience comes from.
John, go back to the big screen. Put us all up on the big screen again.
We're coming. Hold on.
Go back to the big screen.
Yeah, so I've been working in construction on and off my entire working life. In the past 5 or 6 years, I've been working on new build projects. In the town I live in, there was a thing in the paper just saying, you know, showing off about we're building 5,000 new homes in the area, and everyone I spoke to was really excited about it. You know, jobs, houses, basically, because we did have quite a big homeless problem, and we had a lot of, you know, like your hidden homeless people living on sofas, living with their grandparents, and it was quite exciting. Everyone's like, oh, great. And it was being built on ex-MOD land. So it wasn't going to interfere with any farms. It wasn't going to interfere with any agriculture or anything. And we were all happy about it. And say 2 years later, I ended up working on that project. And it really wasn't what it was sold to us to be. I noticed, because I deal with the customers sometimes when they've already moved into the house, a little bit of customer care, stuff like that. And in order for us, like how we do it is we'll release, say, 10 houses, and we'll just move our fence line up for our perimeter fence. So we're quite often walking past the houses that people have already moved into, like the occupied homes. And I noticed that a lot of the people I spoke to, now you're talking, a lot of these homes are like 500,000 or more. Not all of them, but I mean, the cheapest one I went to look at was 320,000. And that's not affordable, especially not for local people. And a lot of the people I was speaking to that had moved in, I was like, oh, I recognise your accent. Where are you from? And it turns out that most of them have moved up from London or the surrounding counties. They've used their right to buy. They've sold their council house and literally got, you know, 650, 750,000 for it. Moved up to where I'm living and literally bought a house twice the size, a new car, and they're much better off literally just from selling the council house. But my point was they're not really helping the local situation. And then on the other hand, there was a lot of people, I noticed a considerable amount of people from Hong Kong that had bought these houses. And once again, it's it's really not helping the local situation out. I don't know anyone locally that's bought any of these houses. And anyway, so I then moved on because we get moved around from one site to another. If they need somebody elsewhere, then we have to jump in and help out. So I'd already noticed that there were a lot of timber frame houses being built. So I moved on to a site where we're actually on a timber frame project. Now it's I'm not sure if you understand how. So you've got these prefabricated, what we call timber cassettes. And it's basically like a wall, but it's in two pieces. So they bolt all that together. Basically, you put the foundations down, get the services in, the gas, electric, and water. Then they get the crane in, put the cassettes round, bolt them together. The roof's already been prefabricated on the ground, so that's just literally lifted up like the roof trusses without the tiles and felt and batten on. That's then lifted up and placed on top of the house, then bolted in. So these houses can literally be constructed. We go by a schedule, but these houses can actually be constructed. If you didn't go by the schedule, you could go literally from foundation to key handover in 30 days. Now, you imagine if you had enough land, how many of those you could build in 6 months, 2 years. And in that link that I sent you, Keir Starmer said he's building 1.4 million homes. I'm pretty sure they just missed out the word social housing, because we already build more than that over the space of 5 years. Now, in 1968, this country built the most houses it's ever built, or the most homes. They built 430,000 homes in 1968. Now, over the recent years, and I'd say ever since then, they haven't gone over 260,000. So that's where your housing problems come along. But with them changing the definition of green belt into blue belt / grey belt, you're really looking at the great, and with the population growing by a minimum of 1.2 million per year, just with immigration and stuff, you're literally looking at the Great British countryside just becoming a massive housing project. And it doesn't seem to be for local people. And it's the problem waiting to happen, really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Paul? You're muted.
Let me say a few things about that which are really important. First of all, we're in a demographic disaster zone. The population of Britain, due to immigration and a much higher birth rate amongst the ethnic minorities, is going to reach over 80 million within 10 years. So we're going to need in excess of 5 million new homes. And you talk about maybe 1.4 million over the next 5 years. That's not going to be totally inappropriate. So we're going to get massive overcrowding in cities. We're going to get constant rent inflation. Social housing is going to be very precious, but it will be very difficult to obtain. But the actual cost of land to build on is going to go through the roof. This is why properties are going to get more and more expensive, because it's going to be very expensive to build. Now, when you build 1 million houses, you need a lot of road to supply them. You need new schools for the people who are moving in. You need new hospitals. You need new airports. You need new bus stations. You need new train stations. You need new commercial centres, office centres, retail centres, police stations, fire stations. You need a whole infrastructure of a city, which is more than twice the size of the houses you're going to build. Now, the land isn't there. I mean, I live in Liverpool. John lives in Greater Manchester. There's only 35 miles between Liverpool and Manchester. And in between is a huge town called Warrington, which is already 250,000 people. The reality is you've got two green belts between Warrington and Manchester and Warrington and Widnes, which is the sort of south end of Liverpool, which are only between 5 and 10 miles wide. They want to build on that green belt. So Liverpool, Warrington, Manchester are going to merge and become a city. You go north of Liverpool. I mean, every year I used to go and to the get the bus to Formby once a year when the potato crop was in flower, because it's a beautiful sight to see all the potato fields, beautiful purple flowers, very fragrant. I used to love just going through them all on the bus, you know, all the potato fields. And I went this year and they've all disappeared. It's all a housing estate now, a constant housing estate from Liverpool up to Formby, up to Southport, along the Ribble Valley, back down to Manchester, from Liverpool to Warrington to Manchester. It's going to go over the Pennines to Huddersfield, Leeds, Bradford, down to Barnsley, Sheffield, down to Coventry, Birmingham. It's just going to be one massive urban conglomeration right across the north, the northwest, the northeast, into the Midlands. It's going to be a conurbation of over 15 million people. And the reason for this is you see, this was threatened in the 1960s. I mean, Lee talked about 68 when they built 400,000 houses. The plan then was to create this conurbation for British people. But this time, the conurbation is going to be built for foreign people, from people from Africa, people from the Middle East, people from the Far East. We've heard of these people from Hong Kong, people especially from the Indian subcontinent. The population of Pakistan is still exploding. They only have to export 100, 200,000 people every year to Britain. And we're going to soon be saturated because we haven't got the surplus land. All the surplus population, which is moving into Britain, is really moving south of Leeds and east of Wales. It's moving into like a square block in the bottom third of the British Isles. And that's where everyone's going to live. It's going to be like Calcutta. It's going to be a concrete jungle. There might be a few pockets of green land, but they're going to get smaller and smaller. And this green and pleasant land that we've inherited, that we all enjoy, we all look on the countryside, it's going to be lost. We're going to be a country of motor cars, houses, power stations, urban structure. Now, the big issue is, will we have the wealth to sustain this population? Because it might grow the gross national product in absolute terms, but the per capita income, the wealth per person, is going to get smaller. It's not going to grow bigger. So our living standards are going to fall. Our standard of quality of life is going to fall. And does anybody want this? The real irony is the only people who are really promoting this are the Green Party, because they're the party of no borders, open door, mass immigration. The Green Party should be renamed the Concrete Party. I've been saying that for the last decade, because they want to concrete over Britain, build homes for the immigrants, and just have these green belts, you know, like national parks where they can go and watch their bird life or squirrel life or whatever they do. So it's all a deception. The Green Party deception. They're not interested in preserving our countryside. The Labour Party are the deception. They're not interested in standing up for the British working class. The Conservative Party are the deception. They're not interested in conserving the quality of our life. The Liberal Party are the deception because they're not liberals at all now. They're woke lunatics. So you've got the Reform Party and then you've got the National Housing Party. We are the only party which is actually speaking common sense in the whole of the United Kingdom. We're saying no more immigration, no more refugees, absolutely no more. Put British people first for social housing. Let's take the pressure off British people first before we carry on bringing all these refugees in. It seems to me that we're living in a lunatic asylum, and this present Labour government is absolutely insane, and the British people are going to suffer from it. We've got to redeem this situation. We've got to get them out of power as quickly as possible. John? John, you're muted. You're muted, John.
Yeah, we've got to. I've put the link to the construction magazine anywhere in. It talks about Labour's blueprint. That's what it talks about. And an interesting thing that I noticed in it when I was looking through one of the things that Lee sent me was that Labour are going to get like, let me just read what it says. They're going to get people to, what did he call it? Just let me just tell you what they call it. 300 more local planning officers by March 2026. And when you work that out, that's like one per town across the country, which just isn't good enough. And even before last week before, I watched a little X video and someone was saying that Labour are going to absolutely fail on this housing thing. That's what they said. Lee's come along and he's showed us stuff that relates to that failure. And what they're going to do. And like you said, Lee said at the beginning, it looked good for his town at the beginning. But then when he noticed that everyone getting the houses wasn't from the town and they weren't dealing with local issues. And this is going to go on across the country, guys. This is not just going to be Leeser. It's going to happen in Oldham. This is what's going to happen. And nobody's addressing these kind of situations and stuff like that. But yeah, it's shocking. There's been a lot in Oldham. A Labour Party councillor stood with the locals against building on the Greenland, and he got deselected from running the next year. And this was a couple of years ago, this. And they did end up building in some Greenland in Chadderton, but they just built like a trading estate that's just like maybe one or two businesses. And they didn't even... like Paul said, they didn't even think about the infrastructure and the roads and all that coming up to it. It's been a bit of a failure in Oldham. And this has gone on across the country, guys. And like Paul said, that infrastructure is important. The building houses in Upper Mill. And if they don't put the right infrastructure in, it's going to be chaos up there. Upper Mill's already tiny roads, you know. It's not a big city. It's a village on the edge of the Pennines. So a lot of the roads are tiny and stuff like that. Another 150, 300 houses is just going to increase traffic. The schools as well. They had to move the school in Upper Mill because the ground it were on was flooded ground, or they built one on flooded ground. Honestly, you just couldn't make it up. So when we think about housing, we've got to think about everything else around the housing, especially the infrastructure. And a lot of the times, we just don't think about these things.
What does Lee think about the Labour's blueprint?
To be honest, I think it's a disaster waiting to happen because, you know, like you were saying about the building on a floodplain, I actually worked on a project where we built a school, all timber framed. The project, looking at it on paper, it was absolutely brilliant. It was surrounded by 3 other fields. One of them's like a horse retirement place. Anyway, but when you looked at it, from like you stood in the middle of the project, you could see all 3 fields surrounding you were higher. Yeah, so it's still a floodplain. I'm not sure what they did. When I was working there, I didn't notice them do anything to stop that. They're just literally taking land from wherever they can get it. And like you were saying with the infrastructure, with the 5,000 homes project where I live, the first thing I thought was, okay, 5,000 new homes, that's a rough estimate, 6,500, 7,000 more cars. Because some people have got 2 cars, some people have got none, some people have got 3. So if you were to say 6,000, so 6,500 more cars. Well, they haven't built any more roads. They've only built, the roads interlinking the actual housing project. There's no like main road coming in. It's just still the same A road. They have got plans. I think this month they've been approved for the rail link. So there'll be a direct rail link straight into the city where a lot of people have moved up from. They still haven't got shops around there. There's like one Budgeons. And depending on what part of the project you live on, it might be close. You might have to get in the car and drive there. There is a supermarket being built, but it's not ready yet. There is a school. Or no, there's a couple of schools. Obviously, you've got to have your lower, middle, and upper school. That they've put in there. But like I said, it's not really doing anything for the local people. And it's local people building it for no benefit to themselves.
You know what strikes me? It's like Britain's a biscuit. And you can bite the biscuit and you bite another bite. This is our countryside. It's just been eaten away. I mean, my brother's gone to live down south in Wiltshire, and he's been working on an extra lane for the M2, is it, that goes from London to South Wales. And this is going to eat up thousands of miles of countryside. So we're just biting this biscuit away all the time. And, it's a little bit there, little nibble there, little nibble there. And soon the countryside will just disappear. Everywhere's going to be an urban jungle. I mean, I was in Manchester, John's hometown, and on Friday, Saturday. And I was really, I've been to Manchester for a couple of years, really spent time there. I was really struck at how heavy the traffic's become in Manchester now. There was a heck of a lot of cars on the roads, and it almost felt like London did in the 1980s. But if you go down to London, it's gridlock in London. If you get a bus in London, it hardly moves for an hour. If you go down in the tubes are like sardine tins. You're just squeezed in. So we're living this illusion that somehow we can accommodate millions of immigrants coming in every year and then because they're coming from cultures like Africa and the subcontinent of India, where they have much larger families, they breed a lot more. They're going to explode our population. So we're having immigrants coming in. These immigrants are having more children. This is multi-million. Labour are making no bones about this. They're opening the immigration floodgates wider than ever. And they're not going to do anything to stop it. And so we're just what is going to be the end product of this? Because it's not only that our social services are being saturated. I mean, if you go to an A&E now, you used to wait maybe 2 to 4 hours. Now you've got to wait 8 to 10 hours if you're lucky. I'm talking to people who are sitting in A&E overnight just to be seen. You see, we've only got a certain amount of resources, and that resources is it's the way they control it is through queuing. You have to wait. These are free at the point of use, but you can't get access to them. This mass immigration saturated our health services. So GP appointments are very difficult now. Getting hospital operations is very difficult. And they're spending a fortune on the NHS, but we don't see any improvement in quality. Our schools are getting saturated. And the actual natures of the school is changing, because for a lot of the kids, English isn't the first language. So that produces all sorts of educational problems. So all our educational resources are now geared towards the immigrant arrivals and the immigrant population. Everything is losing its quality. Everything is losing its point, because these were created to serve the British people, when instead they're serving an army of foreigners who are invading us. It's absolutely crazy. Now, in the 1960s, when we had a natural population growth within Britain, the baby boomers of the early 60s, a whole propaganda campaign was started by the state to tell people to have smaller families. They legalized abortion the murder of preborn children. They promoted the pill. They promoted perverted sexual practices. They encouraged divorce, to break up with the family. They really started attacking the British population in order to reduce it. It was an attack, a moral, spiritual, and actual attack on the British population to drive it down. Once they achieved that, we got stability in the population in Britain. There was stability really between 1970 and around 2000 for 30 years. Virtual stability in the British population. Everything settled down. We developed a good quality of life. Tony Blair comes into power in 1997. He opens the immigration floodgates. Instead of maybe up to 50,000 a year coming into Britain, went up dramatically tenfold to 500,000 a year. And now it's reached this plateau of 1 million a year coming in, immigrants. And they're coming in, year out, month in, month out, week in, week out, day in, day out, not just by boats, but by planes and trains and every other means. They're coming into our cities. So London is saturated. Birmingham is saturated. Manchester has been totally transformed. It's now spilling over to Liverpool. The immigrant population has gone from 20 to 40 to 60 to 80,000. You know, the population, there's no empty houses now in Liverpool. There used to be empty houses on the council estates. You don't see them anymore. Every house is precious. Every room is precious. Every house is fought over. This is going into cities, going north. It's gone to Bradford. It's gone to Leeds. It's going to Newcastle. It's going to Glasgow. There's going to be no escaping it, you know. And then you get what they call a white flight. The British go to Wales. They go to Northern Ireland. They go to Scotland and saturate these areas. There needs to be some common sense. The common sense policy that everyone can see is that we must stop immigration. It's no longer any advantage to the British nation. It's just imposing burdens upon us. It's just lowering the quality of our life. It's just creating this incredible pressure for housing. We have to stop mass immigration. But, I mean, the only party that really campaigned to do that was the Reform Party. They got 4.5 million votes, but they only got 4 seats. And instead, we get the Labour Party, which sort of said that we're going to be sensible about immigration, but really I've just opened the floodgates even wider and will do so. They got a huge majority with just 34% of the vote because they the Tories managed to screw themselves. It's really, it's not justice at all. And we're going to have to put up with madness for 5 years. We're going to have to resist it. We can resist it at local level. We've got to have representatives at local level speaking up for local people. And that's what the National Housing Party of the UK is all about. Giving local people a real voice to say no more immigration, no more refugees, put British people first for housing. John, how important is that?
Very important, putting British people first. EP, if you email me, you can come on a show. You just can't come on tonight, but if you email me, EP, and we'll sort something out. My number's there, my phone number's there as well, mate. So get my phone number and message me. Thank you, Angie, for sharing. Thank you, everyone in the chat. This is Party Talk. Big John Lawrence here, National Housing Party, and we are firing on all cylinders, guys. And as you noticed, the thumbnail to the video, changing politics one brick at a time. That's what it says on the bottom. And that's what we're doing, guys. We're going to change it one brick at a time. But in Lee's case, it's one prefab at a time, if I'm not correct. Lee, them prefab houses, I've seen a couple of TikTok videos with guys doing about that. And it's ridiculous that, you know, we can build houses and we haven't built houses. That's one of the problems that the councils have not dealt with house building for a while. What do you think?
Well, it does seem a bit weird that over the past 2 years or so, I've started seeing these prefabs more and more. Why now? Maybe it's an EU regulation. I could look into that. But why now? it just seems really weird that all of a sudden over the past couple of years, when migration has spiked enormously, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, we've got to build loads and loads more houses. Well, it's like, well, we had a housing crisis. We had homeless people on the streets ever since I've been alive, and obviously longer than that. But all of a sudden, we're literally speeding up the process of building and releasing loads of land. I mean, the project I was speaking about that I was on before, it's all ex-MOD land. Well, that's the knock-on effect of both the Labour Party in Tony Blair and his predecessors' tenure, and within the Conservatives' last 13 years. It all of a sudden seems to have sped up, and the reason there's so much MOD land going spare is because both governments have decimated the British Armed Forces.
Yeah.
And then, as a knock-on effect of that, you see all these videos. Like I'm pretty sure it was in Liverpool. There was a hotel, nice hotel, housing mainly migrants or all migrants. And there's two ex-services guys literally living outside of it in a tent. And it's like, how could that even happen?
Yeah. The ATOs, Lee, you know, and the British citizen, and, you know, we'll say white people, but anybody, Pakistanis, Caribbean, if you've been here 10 years or more, you were last on the housing list, guys. I knocked on a door, and it was after they built a temple in Oldham, and they built it on ground that was highlighted for housing in the area that need housing more than anywhere. And I went complain. So I went across the road and I talked to a family, Pakistani family, and the guy said his son is not going to get an house in Oldham. He has to move outside of Oldham. That's what he was bluntly told off the council, you know. And now we've seen HMOs coming up. Yeah, and it is, the HMOs can be useful, but they've got to be policed properly. There's just near me, just 5 minutes walk, there's a shady road next to the town centre, and in one of these HMOs is like a woman and a kid. They don't come out of the house at night in that area. There's no back garden or anything like that. There's no front garden. It's an old pub right on a main street, and across the road, there's always rubbish and there's always rats running around. And this is where a woman and a kid of about 5-year-old live. You know what I mean? It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I have a bit of different view, me. I'm like me and Paul. Paul lives in Merseyside, beautiful area. I live on the edge of the Pennines, me, and it's a beautiful area in Oldham as well. And Pat lives in central London. Anyone who lives in London, it's a rat race in London. It is really a rat race, and I don't like big flats or anything. We've only ever had 4 blocks of flats in Oldham, and Oldham's the biggest town by area in Greater Manchester, and we've only ever had 4 blocks of flats that are like 15 stories, 18 stories, that's all. But now, everywhere you go, they're developing, they're building more flats, they're building them in city centres, and as well as that, the immigration brings antisocial behaviour. The city centres now are so dangerous. They're so dangerous. When I was younger and I worked in the city centre, come 5 o'clock, people are going home. By 7, there's nobody in the city centre. It's empty. The only places open are the clubs, transport, the train stations and that. Now it's a 24-hour city with people living right in the centre. And it's just causing antisocial behaviour, crime increases, everything. And I mean, if you think about it, building flats and putting everyone into box things. I'm used to a semi-detached house with a garden at the front and a garden at the back. People are now being so much more squashed in. You've got to look at a wall and all that lot. It's just not good, and it's not good for people's health either. It's not good for people's health and living. It really isn't. You're an old person. You've got to do 2 flights of steps to get out. It's just ridiculous.
We've got to look at the financial side of this as well, John. We lived in a very privileged society. Britain, it was a pleasure to live here. There was a good quality of life. People had good housing stock through into the 80s and the 90s. As you say, you're building council houses with gardens back and front. There was sufficient infrastructure and there were jobs available for people. And we've really, if we look back, the 80s, the 90s, the noughties were a bit of a golden age, really. But now we've entered a totally different environment. And how is the government financing this? Because we've seen a deindustrialization of Britain. Most of our industries have shut down. So we're becoming a service economy. But where is the government getting it? Where are we financing all this? Do we provide sufficient services to finance a population of 80 million people? We need to generate wealth to look after our people, to look after our old people, to look after our, provide the services and just provide a decent quality of life. The way we've managed to finance this, certainly since the Tony Blair era, has been through borrowing. We've borrowed an astronomical amount of money. More than £1 trillion has been borrowed. That's like, more. I think it's closer to 2 trillion. We're financing our deficit through constant borrowing, and that strategy, as it's over, because the interest rates have had to go up because of inflation. In a sense, COVID scuppered it all, and we now can't afford to borrow anymore. So Starmer, when he did that cut to the pensioners, to their winter fuel allowance, that was a shot across our bows. There's going to be cuts galore on the way to the pensioners, to normal people. There's going to be cuts in services because we're not bringing in the industry to go alongside this exploding population. We're not generating the extra wealth. This is why this immigration is so mad, because we're bringing in dependent people who are going to live on benefits. 80% are going to live on benefits for their whole lives and become part of a benefit culture or do low-skilled jobs which don't generate wealth by the million. It's going to hit us hard financially. And this is why people are suddenly realizing that everything's getting more expensive. The quality of public services is going down. The availability of jobs, good quality jobs, are starting to contract. It's not a good prospect for the future. People have got to think clearly about these issues, and it's only going to be resolved politically. The right political party with the right policies. Now, the Labour Party have got all the wrong policies. They're going to make everything worse and worse. I mean, they serve the public sector unions, so they're going to give big wage rises to those in the public sector. They serve the immigration machine. There's a lot of people living off this mass immigration. Lawyers, hoteliers, social services. They're all working for these people now. Even the school teachers in the hospitals, they're using these mass immigration influx to build careers for themselves. But it's not wealth generating. They're not generating wealth. They're not adding value to our economy. They're really just parasitic, and they're drawing blood out of our economy and draining us. And I can see a crisis coming very quickly in this country, especially with what's happening globally, the contraction of the global economy, the slowdown of the Chinese economy, the war in the Ukraine, the wars in the Middle East, the mismanagement of the American economy. There could be troubled days ahead, and we're going to need a political party to fight on behalf of the British people. And that's what the National Housing Party, the UK, is all about. We've got to have a grassroots movement where we can actually get our voices out there and actually challenge the ruling establishment. And that can only be done democratically at the ballot box through local parties like the National Housing Party. We've got to wake up, we've got to rise to the challenge, and we have got to impose common sense back on the government of this country, because we're not getting any. John? You're on mute, John. You're on mute.
Yeah, we're not getting any support or anything off locals. But the biggest thing I see here, right, even before this past 20 years, when we started to sell houses, councils were not building them to replace them. This is well known, guys, across the country. And this is 30 years ago. This was, you know, after Maggie put the houses up for sale, they weren't building the houses. What they were doing, they were squandering the money and putting it into the council, giving them pay rises. Every council gets a pay rise, putting on other projects, but not rebuilding the houses. And no matter what anyone says, that is one of the major things. We're in a crisis now as well, because they didn't bother building houses and just left them all. But like I said, the country needs a good refit. Oldham, lots of houses that are over 100-year-old mill houses. They're not good for big families and stuff like that. They're not steep steps. They're not good for elderly people and that. So, you know, we do need, and there's quite a few of them kind of houses in my area where I'm running. And I've been in these houses. I've looked at them. I've weighed up the steps. I've measured things, thinking, how do people live in these houses? But, you know, people don't think about that. I mean, one of our things to do with the party was a build detention area or detention centres, and with a fence round. And then when these detention centres become empty, because if we were in power, there'd be lots of people locked up because they're illegals, they're not supposed to be here, they'd be locked up. Once they went, we'd use these in the times where they had to put back into the community. So let's just say we made like 30 properties in an area. When it's all finished and there's nobody in them, we give them to the community and stuff like that. That's what we thought about doing. And the idea of these prefab houses that Lee's mentioned would be really good for that kind of thing. Would be really good. You know,
how does Lee see the future, John? How does Lee see the future now for construction in this country with the explosion of the population? What does he see happening in the housing market?
Well, the company I work for, we actually sell direct. We don't have any estate agents. We sell the houses. And I think, to be honest, most new build companies do the same. And it's lining somebody's pocket. But for instance, these timber frame houses with so what it is, it's the timber frame, but it's got a brickwork fascia. So to look at it, you think it's a traditional build, but the brickwork is not part of the structure whatsoever. It's just a fascia. And building to this standard, the house is a lot more energy efficient. So the government's off your back straight away because the energy efficiency. They're like, oh, that's great, brilliant, carry on. And those houses can be up to 40% cheaper to build. But when you look at the square meterage, you know, like there's so many square meters in this property or square footage, an equivalent house that's on a traditional build, it's exactly the same price. So the building firms are basically pocketing that between 20 and 40% that they're saving on building, on materials and that. And it's just going to get worse. But I can't honestly see how people are struggling at the moment to buy these houses anyway. You remember when Liz Truss made that silly announcement, and for some reason she said like 2 sentences and it made the interest rate absolutely skyrocket. Well, we had 5 houses on the section I was working on that were ready to move into. I think it was staggered over 2 weeks. When it finally came down to it, only 2 of those houses got occupied because the other 3 people, the minute that announcement was made, their mortgage approval went out the window. And these were ready to move in. So you've got little mistakes like that. People are already struggling to buy these houses. I mean, what when all the right to buys in London and the surrounding counties have all been sold? and nobody can afford to buy these places because local people certainly can't. Like I said, the cheapest one I looked at was, and this was about 4 years ago, because I was looking to buy one myself. And I went in, I had a look round, and I thought, well, it's quite minimal. It doesn't have a garage. It's got like a carport, like a little gazebo you park underneath. Didn't have the fancy kitchen, didn't have any of the extras. It was just a bog standard place. And when the lady said, right, well, that place starts at 320,000, I was like, look, don't let me waste any more of your time. I haven't got that. I can't afford that. And both me and my wife work. Neither of us are on minimum wage, so we both earn slightly more than that. And if we can't afford that place, how's anyone, you know, say the manager of Tesco's or a supermarket worker, or even in my town, even the dustmen don't actually work direct for anyone. They work for Blue Arrow Agency. How are they ever going to afford any of this? But then all they'll be doing is renting and paying extortionate rental prices.
The thing is, Lee, will the housing bubble finally burst just in terms of value? Obviously, the demand isn't going to be reduced, but the people coming in cannot, obviously, they're looking for social housing. The ones who are staying in the hotels now, they're looking for freebies. They're not looking to buy anything, not in the short term. Some may be, because a lot of these people are deceptive. They do come from, like, you know, money. There's all sorts of connections with organized crime, drug importation, whatever. There are big bucks flowing about. But by and large, they will not actually be able to buy into our property market. Ever since Margaret Thatcher came to power in 1979, we've seen this incredible surge in property values. In the past, it was cyclical. The property price would go up, it would stagnate, then it would come down, and it'd go back up again. All we've seen is like a rocket taking off. Property values in Britain have just got higher and higher. That's really a lot to do with the city of London, London itself, and that's spilling out to the rest of the country. But that's coming to an end, because it's got to such a peak now, the property prices, that there's no more fuel in the rocket. It can't really go higher, can it? I mean, you can't afford 320,000. Who can? So what happens if the property price, if the bubble bursts? A lot of people, I mean, we saw this briefly under John Major. A lot of people call it negative equity. If people get trapped in negative equity under Labour, this will be disaster for them politically. I think there's so many disasters now are all converging. The threat of negative equity, the shortage of social housing, the surging cost of rents, the cost of living crisis is ongoing. The mortgage, the interest rate is still far too high. People are struggling to pay their mortgages now. The actual deficit in the public sector, there is so much financial pressure mounting, and I don't see this government having any solutions to these problems. I mean, at the moment, their only solution they seem to offer is to make cuts in basic services and basic provision, which is wrong, because the pensioners have made their inputs for their whole lives. They deserve the money, not the immigrants who have come in who've never contributed anything. So they're going to make cuts to the benefits of pensioners, and they're going to start increasing taxes. There'll be a lot of them will be hidden, but they'll mount up, and eventually they become more explicit. I think, you know, getting this government into power, Keir Starmer, with a big majority, I think there's going to be a lot of pain for a lot of people ahead. More taxes, more pressure on the cost of living, poorer services, and God help you if you need housing. John?
Oh, drop my phone then, bloody hell. Yeah, someone messaged me. Yeah, honestly, you know, it's just ridiculous. But, you know, immigration, there's a lot of issues behind housing. And yeah, I agree, the biggest issue is the amount of people we're getting in now. But like I said, the councils have failed. Our councils are going bankrupt. Councils can't even run their own departments, let alone the housing department. How are they supposed to do stuff like that when they can't even run themselves, and it's a disaster across the country. And this is dozens and dozens of councils, and obviously government policy has a lot to it. But people should be mad that Angela Rayner has put the British citizen on the back foot. That's what she's done. You're last on the list, and she's pressuring now. She wants asylum seekers all over the UK. And I can tell you right now that there is more asylum seeker refugees in the north of England than there is in the south. Andy Burnham's talked about this a couple of years ago, and other prominent people. And Angela wants everyone to accept their own, so you're going to get more. The worst area for immigrants, refugees and asylum seekers are northeast. It's absolutely decimated the northeast. It's got no, they've got no proper industry there now, and immigration has absolutely devastated it in a lot of ways. I've talked about this before. So, you know, this is a load of things issue. We've got to come together and sort it out, guys. Get emailing your local council. They come to your door, ask them what they're going to do about housing, what they're going to do about putting British citizens first. You know what I mean? And we need to pull down the house pricing. When we get in power, we'll have to look at these mortgage companies and these banks and give them a right spanking. You know what I mean? Because they're part of the cause of why all this is high. So we've got to sort it out. But thank you very much, everyone in the chat. This is John Lawrence National Housing Party and our weekly stream. Legendary Paul Rimmer there, and our member and candidate, Lee. And it's a bit of a jump. Lee's come right into it and come on the stream tonight. But some really interesting stuff from Lee, because Lee works it. Lee sees it. And he's seen, and as Lee said at the beginning, he's seen this changing over the past few years. The same I've seen and the same Paul's seen. So that's a thank you, Lee. Thank you for coming on, mate. Any last words?
My pleasure. Yeah, just one incidental thing. We've obviously got a hotel locally housing migrants. Now, it wasn't quite the same as a lot of hotels. It was mainly people from the Afghan airlift, and there were a lot of Ukrainian fleeing the war in Donbass. A friend of mine works within the social services remit, and she was dealing with one family at this hotel. Now, they got moved from there directly to a house or a flat in Bournemouth. Now, my question would be, how were they moved from the East Midlands to Bournemouth without ever being on the Bournemouth housing list? Has that not bypassed some local people? And
Absolutely.
when I googled, do migrants get priority over British people in housing? And I even put the question on Quora, and every answer I got was no, absolutely not, absolutely not. But if you can do it that way, by housing them outside of the area that they're living in, then you can sort of say, no, they're not. And you're not really lying, but you're not really telling the whole truth. And seems like a dodgy little backdoor way of housing people without locals getting the ump about it. But obviously the people in Bournemouth, somebody there is, you know, a family in Bournemouth has been put one down the list straight away because somebody from the East Midlands, or somebody that's living in the East Midlands that's actually from the Ukraine, has just literally sailed in there and taken that house from them.
There's a lot of deception going on, Lee, within the system. But we know that the people who actually run the system don't run it in the interest of the British people. And in a sense, we're responsible for that, because the truth is we've been too passive for too long. We put our faith in these mainstream political parties, in the civic institutions that are set up, and they've all changed their agendas. They're not listening to us. We have got to be proactive. We've got to be outspoken. We've got to campaign. We've got to get organized. We've got to stand in elections. We've got to challenge them. And this is what the National Housing Party is about. It's bringing people together to challenge the authorities that be to put our interests first, because it's our taxes that finance the system. This is the voice of the people, the Vox Popular, the voice of the people. And we're saying we've got to be put first in our own country. It's the responsibility of the British state to put the British people first. Just like a father, his responsibility is to put his own family first, not the families of the world, his own children. But we can only get these people to act responsibly if we assert ourselves. We've got to get active. We can't be passive anymore. Join the National Housing Party. Contribute if you can. Stand as a candidate. Help with the leafleting. Help with the campaign. We're a grassroots movement. Everyone is welcome. It's not like the Reform Party, which filters out who can join and who can't. We're not interested in what the media say about us. We're interested in getting the British people organised, giving them a voice, standing in elections, getting a good vote, and then starting to win local elections and then making an impact nationally. But what is required is that we get more and more people on board, and that's happening. People are waking up, they're joining, and we're going to make a big impact in the next 2 to 3 years. John?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Lee. Great stream. Very interesting. You've heard a lot, and you've heard it from the horse's mouth. That's what you've heard it from. So that's really good. But thank you for coming on, Lee. God bless you, mate, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Brilliant.
A lot, Lee.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, brother. That was great, Lee. Cheers. Thanks,
Yeah.
John. Take care. See you tomorrow.
Thank you,
The Bible
guys.
study.
Thank you. So don't forget, emails there, phone numbers there, phone me up if you want to EP. You're a veteran, get phoning me up. We'll get you on next week or something like that. And we'll talk about whatever you want. But don't forget, guys, National Housing Party, we're going places and we're running in local elections. God bless you all.